Hey everyone, Pastor Dave here with another weekly devotion for all the saints. I'm going to start with a reading from Sarah Arthur's Coffee with God. This is a devo about playing the part. For one of my first jobs in high school, I was an interpreter at a historic pioneer village, which means I dressed up in old-fashioned clothes and worked at pioneer crafts and talked with tourists all day long. Welcome to the Burns family farmhouse, built in 1867, I would tell them over and over again to each batch of new visitors. And I'd take them on a tour through the building. Sure, it got boring sometimes. What job doesn't? But it was better than a lot of the alternatives my friends were doing. In fact, the really cool part was learning the pioneer crafts. Usually I was stationed in the farmhouse kitchen where my assigned task was to fire up the old cook stove for baking. Yep, build a fire and keep it going all day at just the right temperature. Do you know how hard that is? I would churn butter and make cookies from scratch for the tourists and somehow manage to do it all expertly, even cheerfully, although in real life I can't cook at all. Seriously, I'm a disaster in the kitchen. I generally end up cutting myself, burning fingers, forgetting major ingredients, losing track of time, making everyone else miserable before we finally sit down to eat. There are roughly 2 meals I can make without bursting into tears. Which is why it's so strange that for the entire summer, I somehow managed to simultaneously keep a fire going, churn butter, and make batch after batch of perfectly shaped little sugar cookies that melted in your mouth. And I enjoyed it. I think the reason I succeeded is because I was able to imagine I wasn't Sarah at all, but Mrs. Burns, the farmer's wife, a strong pioneer woman for whom baking cookies was an effortless hobby in the midst of all the other difficult tasks of keeping a farmhouse operative. I stepped into my pioneer clothes and became someone else for the day. I played dress-up, like we all did as kids, all summer long. And as Mrs. Burns, I could tell exactly when the cream turned to butter by the sound in the churn. I could gauge, simply by hovering my palms over the burners, whether or not the stove was hot enough for baking. Something about putting on that pioneer apron transformed my attitude and gave me abilities I didn't even know I had. Question is, if I could do that as Mrs. Burns, what's to stop me from doing that as everyday Sarah? Clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, wrote the Apostle Paul to his friends in Colossae. Maybe we fail at those things God wants us to do because we forget how to play dress-up. Well, saints, this one definitely caught my attention. I resonate with Sarah here with her ineptitude in the kitchen. I understand how frustrating it is to just not be able to create meals. Even though you can follow a recipe, you can do those couple of things that you are good at, but somehow that spark just isn't there where you have the ability to turn ingredients into something delicious that everyone else will love. I get it. I also get what she's saying about being able to do that when she puts herself in someone else's shoes or in someone else's apron, all of a sudden unlocking this new ability that she didn't realize she had. And in that, I see how often we struggle as Christians to do the sorts of things that we think we ought to be doing. We struggle to show generosity, to show compassion, to show patience, to show forgiveness and mercy. We struggle to live out our Christian convictions, and maybe it's just a failure of imagination in a sense. We tend to think that, we're just not good enough. We can't pull it off. We're limited in our ability to follow Jesus. But what we maybe haven't tried doing is imagining ourselves in that role, imagining ourselves as someone who was more capable, more faithful, more Christ-like. What if we called someone to mind who we think is a good role model? Doesn't have to be Jesus himself, but someone who we think is really good at following Jesus. Could we pretend to be that person for a while? I think we might find that we were more capable and more prepared for this life of faith than we originally realized. But there's something about just getting outside of ourselves, laying aside our expectations, our preconceived notions about who we are and what we can do, that makes us more able, Can you use that, saints? Can you use that reality of our ability to play pretend as something that helps build your habits of faith? Saints, that's your devotion for this week. I hope it's something helpful and worth thinking about for you. I hope you're doing well, staying healthy, and I'll be praying for you. Please keep praying for me. I will see y'all again soon. Take care.